Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most consequential dynamics shaping our world, the collision between political power and economic forces. This isn't just theory. The decisions being made in government halls right now are rewriting the rules of global business as we speak. Let's dive in.
Before we get into frameworks and theory, let me hit you with some numbers that tell the story. 145% tariffs, a $1.2 trillion trade surplus, a six-fold explosion in government interventions, and bilateral trade between the world's two largest economies expected to be cut in half. Ladies and gentlemen, the era of frictionless globalization is officially over. These aren't projections from some distant future. This is happening right now in 2025 and 2026. Think of tonight's presentation as a three-act drama. In Act 1, we identify the key players, the political and economic factors that are setting the stage. Act 2 takes us into the intricate dance between political systems and economic systems, how one shapes the other. And finally, in Act 3, we witness the fallout, the real-world consequences for multinational corporations struggling to survive in this new landscape. And for our encore, a deep dive into the most consequential economic showdown of our era, the U.S.-China trade war.
In Act 1, we meet the political forces, and here's what's critical to understand. Governments are no longer passive referees in the global economy. They are active players, using every tool at their disposal. Tariffs as high as 145%, export controls on the most advanced technology humanity has ever created, sanctions that can cripple entire economies overnight, and the data backs it up. BCG found that industrial policy interventions have exploded six-fold since 2021. Governments aren't just regulating business anymore, they're directing it.
Now, the economic forces. Picture a battlefield. GDP growth is uneven, some regions recovering, others stalling. Currency markets are in chaos as trade policies shift. Supply chain costs aren't just rising, they're exploding, because tariffs don't just hit the final product, they hit every single input along the way. And here's what's really telling. Foreign direct investment is physically moving. Companies are pulling out of China and redirecting capital to Vietnam, India, and Mexico. Some are even pausing U.S. investment because of policy volatility. And the scariest part? Global debt is at historic highs, meaning governments have almost no ammunition left to cushion the blow.
Now we enter Act 2, the dance. This is the conceptual heart of our presentation. Here's the fundamental truth. Every political system creates its own economic DNA. Look at this contrast. The United States, a democracy with a free market, generates incredible innovation. American companies design over 90% of the world's most advanced chips. But policy changes with every election cycle, creating uncertainty. Now look at China, an authoritarian system with state-directed capitalism. The government can execute 20-year industrial strategies without worrying about elections. The result? They now control 80% of rare earth mining and 85% of processing. Their manufacturing sector is double the size of America's. Neither system is better, but they produce fundamentally different economic outcomes, and multinational corporations must navigate both.
Act 3, the fallout. This is where theory meets reality. The World Economic Forum interviewed senior executives from over 20 multinational corporations across Asia and Europe in 11 different sectors. What they found was 5 shockwaves rippling through global business. First, supply chains are being completely torn apart and rebuilt. Companies are abandoning the old just-in-time model for regionalized, local-for-local production. One executive literally described their new approach as the Uber of manufacturing, a flexible network of production nodes that can be activated or deactivated based on geopolitical conditions. Second, capital is in flight. Investment geography is being redrawn based on political risk, not just cost. Third, M&A deals now require geopolitical risk assessments. Fourth, risk management has been completely transformed. Geopolitical risk is now a permanent item on every boardroom agenda. And fifth, boards of directors are being revolutionized, bringing in experts in geopolitics and crisis management. This isn't incremental change. This is a fundamental restructuring of how global business operates.
And now for our encore, the case study that brings everything together. The U.S.-China trade war is the single most dramatic example of political decisions reshaping the global economy. In April 2025, U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports hit an almost unbelievable 145%. China's response? They essentially stopped buying American exports entirely. But here's what's fascinating. China's trade surplus didn't shrink. It grew 20% to $1.2 trillion. The tariffs didn't stop China. They just redirected global trade flows. U.S. imports from the world actually rose 4% in 2025. Companies didn't stop importing. They found new sources. Vietnam, India, Mexico became the new supply chain darlings. And now TD Bank projects bilateral trade between the U.S. and China will decline by more than 50% through 2030. This is the great decoupling in action. And for MNCs, the response has been to build entirely new organizational capabilities, dedicated tariff response units, and the China Plus One strategy, where every company maintains at least one alternative to Chinese suppliers.
Before we close, I want to give you a framework for thinking about all of this going forward. BCG has identified 6 arenas where politics and economics are colliding. These are the 6 competitive spaces that will define global business for the next decade. Trade and foreign direct investment are being realigned into a patchwork of bilateral deals. The tech and artificial intelligence race is intensifying, with the United States creating 59% of top-performing large language models, in China at 26%. There's a global talent scramble. The U.S. attracted 460,000 highly skilled immigrants, while the U.K. attracted 190,000. Governments are intervening directly in mission-critical sectors. Climate policy is fragmenting along national interest lines. And armed conflicts are at their highest level since World War II, spanning not just physical battlefields, but digital, space, and undersea domains. This is the landscape every business leader must navigate.
So what's the final word? It comes down to this. We are no longer living in a world where you can separate business strategy from political strategy. The era of frictionless globalization, where you could optimize purely for cost and speed, is over. The World Economic Forum put it perfectly. The successful firm of the next decade will be the one that embeds geopolitical strategy into its DNA, not as an afterthought, not as a risk committee side project, into its DNA. This new reality has a name, geo-business, and the question facing every business leader, every MBA student in this room, isn't whether politics will affect your business. That's already happening. The question is, are you ready? Thank you.
So what's the final word? It comes down to this. We are no longer living in a world where you can separate business strategy from political strategy. The era of frictionless globalization, where you could optimize purely for cost and speed, is over. The World Economic Forum put it perfectly. The successful firm of the next decade will be the one that embeds geopolitical strategy into its DNA, not as an afterthought, not as a risk committee side project, into its DNA. This new reality has a name: geo-business. And the question facing every business leader, every MBA student in this room, isn't whether politics will affect your business. That's already happening. The question is, are you ready? Thank you.
Thank you for your attention. I'm Brian Belial from the University of Washington's IBIS 580 program. I welcome your questions and look forward to our discussion.